everybody. My name is Jay. I work here at Southeast with the Missions Ministry with a lot of our local partners all over the area. And I am thrilled to let you all have an opportunity to get to know these two ladies from Safe Passage. I'm going to let Kara start off and let her tell the story of where Safe Passage came from.
Hey everybody, I'm Kara. I founded Safe Passage, which is just crazy because my whole life I said, hey God, I'm never going to start my own nonprofit. So, be careful. You know what, that's just how it works. What happened was I grew up at a place called, at Refuge for Women. That's where I, was working career-wise for 3 years. And so for 3 years, I was working with women who had been trafficked and exploited. 3 years into that, I began doing development across the state. And I attended this 5-state conference put on by Washington, D.C., but it was held here locally in Louisville. And I remember the speaker, I had attended a session on trafficked youth because we were running youth prevention programs. And I just remember the speaker saying something like, our nation is never going to have enough services for women who've been trafficked, but we have borderline zero for trafficked youth. By the way, this conference is in Louisville, and she addressed the crowd and said, did you know Kentucky has no specialized services for trafficked youth? And that really hit me, which was funny because something else hit me and someone next to me elbow punched me, and it was a detective in our area, and he just elbowed me and he said, are you listening? And I just said, I'm listening. I don't know what you want me to do. We don't help youth. And I sat there and started to realize, in my life, I knew God was calling me to the front line of this issue with human trafficking. But the other cry of my heart has always been youth. And so for me to sit in that conference and to say, wow, these are the two cries of my heart. I've been called to the front line of trafficking. I know I'm called to youth and ministry with youth. And never once in my whole life did I combine those and say, what is God doing for trafficked youth? And I said, if I've never asked myself that question, I know no one else has. So that moment, that conference, that elbow nudge, it changed the rest of my life. And it began this journey where we just did some digging in the state and talking to partners. And here we are, responding to the issue.
How many years later is this?
Okay, so we're going into our third year of Safe Passage, but last year was our second year, so the joke is 2020 doesn't count because of COVID. And
For sure.
3 years.
So 3 years in?
Minus one that didn't count. So yeah.
That's awesome. So Jen, a little bit of your story. I know you're recently involved more directly with Safe Passage, but just share whatever you feel comfortable and want to share about how you got involved with Safe Passage and what your role is.
Sure. My name is Jen, and I'm the Director for Family Support Services for Safe Passage. And my role comes through experience. I am a survivor of trafficking from the ages of 7 to 31. And the Lord grabbed my heart at 31 years old. I walked out of the industry and into a new life in Christ. In that time, I just really developed a heart for the people who were still walking in those destructive lifestyles. I'm a survivor of everything. I have a story of all stories, and I'm able to take that into everything that the Lord puts in front of me. So fast forward to now, Safe Passage. I met Kara. I was speaking at a human trafficking rally
at Southeast.
Was it? At Southeast? Oh, it was. The first one was at Southeast, and then at the Capitol. And after that, Kara invited me to coffee, and we had a couple of times that we met and talked, and then she gave me the invitation to come on board. And I took it to prayer, and it was a big yes for me. The direction of Family Support Services is the whole family as a unit. We don't want to just mentor a child coming out of trafficking or those who are at risk. We want to get the family involved as well. So our goal is to educate the family and the child in two different directions, but the same purpose in mind of what trafficking looks like and the trauma that comes behind that. So we'll be doing the whole unit and repairing and restoring families under the banner of Jesus Christ. We have a lot of great success when we do the whole family and not just one person, because one person gets worked on and this person doesn't change, then that's really not changing the dynamic of things. This person is naturally going to be drawn back into that destructive lifestyle. So our goal is to absolutely work with the whole family and get that family supported.
Yeah. So help us. Trafficking can be a really hard conversation to have in the church, or really probably any space, because part of you wants to just look the other way, not out of a negative, but out. It's just so hard to think about what happens to these victims. So for those of the audience that haven't really dug into this and looked up the statistics, and most of what they know maybe is just from hearsay of, you know, the Super Bowl being the worst day every year, or that kind of level of knowledge, help us see the fuller picture of why these services are so necessary here.
You know, people are like, you know, I don't see human trafficking, and that's because by, you know, Netflix and Hollywood and viral things on social media just kind of whack. You know, they're kind of looking for this very extreme version of trafficking, which does exist, but the more common forms of trafficking are simply manipulating the child to think this guy loves her. And if you've never been loved in your whole life, if you grew up being sexually abused by your daddy who says, I love you, but I hurt you, and someone on the internet comes along and says, hey, you want to like escape your life? Yeah, me too. Let's go away together and I'll love you. And so when he starts hurting her and using her in different ways, but says, I love you, she doesn't know love does no harm. She doesn't know what that is. And so when children have grown up in abusive homes and families, and finally trafficking is introduced with more complex levels of, you know, misusing children, they don't recognize the difference because no one ever taught them what true love is.
Yeah, so what looks to us sometimes like an isolated child or a runaway story,
Badly behaved.
Poorly behaved, someone else who has a lot of control over the child that we wouldn't know necessarily isn't the parent, but isn't the parent when we dig in. It's those kinds of things that start to be kind of the red flags.
Concerns, yeah. One of the things to think about is, you know, people are like, well, tell me the numbers. And human trafficking is harder to catch because usually someone's, you know, taking a child in for abuse or neglect, and trafficking is caught 2 years later in counseling and that kind of stuff. So when people are like, show me numbers, I'm like, all right, let's talk about risk factors. What makes a child at risk for human trafficking? Drugs and alcohol, and Kentucky is in the top 10 states. Child abuse, and we are the #1 state for child abuse. Running away, 1 in 3 runaway youth are picked up by a trafficker. And so I think Kentucky, if we have these huge risk factors for, you know, kids who are at risk for trafficking, and like they're unprecedented at a national scale, we definitely have a trafficking problem.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead. I
think Kara said it when our culture has become desensitized to the depravity of trafficking. It's not the movies, it's not television, it's everyday life for so many children. And what we know is children don't run to something typically, they run from something. So when they're running from something, unfortunately, they're running to the danger and they just don't realize it. So we really want to educate the society, the church, the courts on the severity of the issue that we have. We know that most children have at some point filtered through the welfare system and foster care. So if you look at those statistics, about 90% of the children that are taken from trafficking have filtered through that system. If you had a ballpark figure number, that is thousands of children every single year that are being trafficked or at risk for it.
Yeah. And so I know that's also not all that you all do. You're also really involved in the schools, so I want to make sure we hit a little bit about that. So tell us some about that. I don't know what you call it, education, call it preventative, whatever piece it is.
Yeah, we have an in-school prevention program. We provide it to middle schools and high schools at no cost to them. And what we go in and do is educate students about sexual abuse and human trafficking. And the reason we pair those is because most trafficked victims experience sexual abuse in their childhood. And so we see that if children have this childhood trauma and don't receive help and intervention, then it just cycles into more trauma. And we want to break that loop. We want to get them off the trauma cycle there. And so we go in and we really help them process through sexual abuse. What does the victim feel like? Why don't victims report? If you need to make a report today, we're here and we're going to walk you through that. And then talking about human trafficking as well. In 2 years, we've educated over, I think, 5,000 professionals, 500 community members, and over 3,200 students.
Oh, that's awesome. Share a little bit about which school systems it is, because I think for some of our campuses, that'll really help them understand where you are.
Mostly like Jefferson and surrounding areas.
So Bullitt County, right?
Yes, we are in several of the Bullitt schools.
Yeah, which is great, because we have a Bullitt County campus. So if you missed that somewhere, but if you're from the Bullitt County campus, you should get in touch with these guys, because they are in your schools that your community and your children are going to, and they're being a great presence there. So let's not let this all go before we have a little conversation about how people who are interested can actually get involved and help out with your mission. What can some folks do?
Want to tee it up?
Sure. We love volunteers. We know that the more someone gets involved, the more their heart grows for this industry, and the more that they realize you don't have to have this story to be a resource for these children to get whole, to be healed. So we pull from the same source, and that's Jesus Christ. So we love our volunteers, and we have many different areas that we're looking for people. We administration, giving rides, event planning, mentoring and teaching,
Prayer team.
Prayer team, hey, I mean, that's really important too. So we do have a prayer team, and we would love for you to be a part of our prayer team where you hold up our arms.
Talk for a little bit. One of the things that, all of our ministry partners pray, but I appreciate about Safe Passage is you all have an actual strategy and regular prayer meetings, Zoom, whatever, that you're actually asking people to come and pray with you for. So hit a little bit of the detail on that, because for those that want to pray, this is a great ministry to jump into.
Yes.
So we are doing quarterly prayer calls right now. We do have monthly prayer calls with a more intercessory team, because that's how important prayer is for us. But that's like talking through our cases and that kind of stuff. So we open it up to the public on a quarterly basis, and we invite anyone to attend those.
Yeah, so if you're looking to jump into a place where prayer, you have that burden, and prayer has been a regular part of your spiritual journey, and you want to know how can you impact the community and some really vulnerable children through prayer, this is one of your best avenues to do that. Are there other volunteer opportunities? Did I cut you off by asking to jump in on prayer?
No, we just have a plethora of volunteer opportunities. The best thing to do would just be get in touch with us, and we can see what your giftings are and how we can plug you in.
Yeah, for sure. So how do people get in touch?
Woohoo! Woo! Okay, so one of the best ways to just take a first step, because some of this can be overwhelming, and you probably want to learn more about the issue and more about what we do, and we make that really, really easy. We have a monthly lunch and learn, and so it's no cost. You're our guest, and we invite you to check out our profile and to get those dates and to register. And so when you come, you'll just be sitting around enjoying lunch and hearing us talk about what we do, our mission, and helping you kind of process through other ways to get involved. And so I think that's a really good, easy first step.
Is that both digital and virtual?
Right. I think we'll have virtual.
Digital and virtual. Both in person?
Yeah.
It will be both digital and virtual when that's ready.
Right now
it's in person.
Is this real life?
Right now it's in person?
Right. It's in person. Okay. Right now we're offering a Zoom option. I'm not sure if that will be always, but for the next few months, definitely.
It's in Louisville right now?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's in person in Louisville, but if you want to jump in and, your lunch, it might be hard to get away from work, and if you're in Bullitt County or wherever you may be, you can do the Zoom version, at least the next couple times. Happens once a month. So that is the best place for sure, just to go and get your questions answered. I think, at least for me, this whole idea of the really vulnerable among us who have experienced these extremely traumatic events can feel like it's really hard to enter into. It can feel like you need to be a specialist, you need to have some sort of training, or you need to have your own story that's worse than their story. And none of that's true. So that's why I bring that up here at the tail end, is to say, if you don't feel experienced enough, your story doesn't match this, but your heart is just breaking for children, and some now who have become adults who have gone through this, like there is a space for you to actually make a difference with vulnerable children in this.
Yeah. And we invite you.
Yeah, and we'd love to have you do that. So you can check out the Unleashed app, you can check out some of the conference details, you can find Safe Passage, and you can sign up for one of their lunch and learns, learn more about them, and jump on in. Thank you so much for your time.